Hi, my name is Dave Muchow, and I'm managing partner of Muchow Law in Arlington, Virginia. Have you ever felt like your company is not reaching its full potential? Is it kind of like this old tractor that I have that just chugs along and really isn't doing much? Well, if so, listen in because I'm going to give you 5 points that will help your company be more successful. These are based on my experience over many years as being a CEO, helping hundreds of companies and teaching law, business, and entrepreneurship. Number one is management Zen. What is management Zen? Well, management Zen is what you need to help you fight against chaos in your company. As a CEO, you're being bombarded by people and things on finance and personnel, and there's always a phone call and one you want to make and not make. And reminds me of when I was in Tokyo some years ago, and I'm at the airport, and there's a big crowd around, and it was actually a chaotic event. And I went over to see what it was, and what it was a bunch of people looking at this little toy that does this. Whoa. And that is chaos. And as you can see, there's really only so much of that you can take. So when you're trying to manage the chaos, the first thing you need to do is to manage yourself. That's not easy. It's not a sprint. It's more like a marathon. Manage yourself. And it reminds me of being with a friend of mine who was running a fabrication firm out in Virginia, and he did things for the CIA, and everything was urgent and important, and some things lives depended on. And I walked up to him one day and I said, "How you doing?" And he paused and he thought for a minute, and then he smiled and he said, "I just let this run all over the top of my head." Now there's an example of somebody who has achieved management Zen. He knew that no matter what he did, some things are not going to work out well, but it didn't bother him. And it allowed him to continue to be focused on the key objectives so that he could be successful. And that is management Zen number one. Well, so much for management Zen. And now let's get into managing with minimum smart management. So here's a toy that kind of reminds me of what we're dealing with. Now, there is a lot of activity. Pretty monotonous. A lot of it is the same. But you need to focus on results and not just activity. And how do you stay focused? Well, minimum smart management is one way to do that. It's using the greatest amount of focus in order to get things done with the least amount of time and effort. So when I was CEO of a high-tech company, one of the things we did to stay focused was we painted an entire wall, a 20-foot wall, with whiteboard paint. And off to one side, we had all of the objectives and the key activities and so forth. So we never lost focus of those. And then we had about 18 feet where you could play around and draw diagrams, and throw ideas up there. And when you do that, things start to connect. I mean, think about it. If you had to print something out, but had to invent the printer first, it would have taken you a heck of a lot longer. So it makes sense to pin some things down, get them all together, do your brainstorming, and move on from there. That's minimum smart management. The other thing you can do is to draw a quadrant on a sheet of paper or whiteboard, whatever you have. And the quadrant would be divided into urgent and important. And what you want to do is stay focused on those activities that are both urgent and important, and get rid of the ones, which is hard to do, that drop below the activity line of being urgent and important. And that is number two, which is minimum smart management. Okay, let's talk about number three. Be humble, understand your strengths and weaknesses. This is really important. You've got to be able to listen as a CEO. Senior executives that I've seen are humble and ask questions, even to the point of when they know the answer, because they're humble enough to understand they don't have all the answers. Reminds me of one of my friends who was former vice president of one of the big utility companies, and he was at a retirement party. And he said, you know, I'll tell you, one of the secrets of my success was that I asked questions when I already thought I knew the answer, and I act humble about it. And I got a lot more information and a lot more cooperation from my staff when I did that. So make sure that you do things that will help you listen. One is find somebody on your board of directors that maybe you have a particularly good personal relationship with. Get them off to the side sometime, take them off to lunch and say, okay, would you please let me know how I'm doing? How am I doing? How's the company doing? I want you to be 100% honest. You'll find that to be very helpful because people won't speak up necessarily in a board meeting, but they would when you're having a casual conversation and they don't want to hurt your feelings. The other thing you can do is have a 360-degree review program. It's a little dicey here, and I've been through some of these, where there are anonymous reviews conducted by a third party of the people above you, which should be your board of directors perhaps, and a couple of levels below you, and your peers if you have peers. And you get that feedback, and sometimes it's pretty sobering, but it's exactly what you need. So remember, be humble and listen. And that is key number 3. Okay, folks, total situational awareness is tip number 4. It is a natural human tendency for everyone to want to work on what they like to do and what they know how to do best and enjoy. And life's a little bit easier that way. Think about the drummer who's a great drummer in an orchestra and is really good at something. He's good at drums. And now all of a sudden he's got to lead an orchestra. That means he's got to be aware of a lot more things going on in all directions. That is total situational awareness. And it seems to be a contradiction because you got to stay focused on your objectives while looking out for everything around you, like my friend here, Mr. Risky. And risk is always sitting right at your shoulder. And if you just focus on one thing that you love to do or the key activities, and you don't look around every now and then and say, what are the risks that I'm not looking at? You can lose your company pretty quick. So track each goal, track each activity, put dates on them, get that stuff all put together, but then step back and say, what am I missing? And make sure that you spend some time looking at that so that you can achieve total situational awareness. Key number 5, use Methics. What's Methics? Management ethics. Now, all of us know that it's good to be ethical, and you should be. But you know, it's really good for business. Would you like to do business with someone who you can't trust? Your staff wants to look up to you. People around you want to feel like they're working with a good company. It brings in more business. It's a good thing. And you'll be happier if you do things right. As a former federal prosecutor, I can tell you, you'll be very unhappy if you try to cut too many corners, unless you like to wear orange a lot. So make sure that you're being ethical in everything that you do. Sometimes when I have a new client, I tell them right up front, look, my job, and you're paying me for it, my job is to tell you what I think you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And if you get too close to the edge and I'm telling you that you're at the edge and you're going to be violating the law and you want to keep going, then I'm out of here. I think you'd be much happier with another person representing you. Well, taking all of these 5 tips together, I think if you use these from time to time as appropriate, you will be more successful. Make sure you remember some of these, and there's a lot more on my website, which is davidmuchowlaw.com. And I wish you the absolute very best success in your business. Thanks so much for joining us.